police arresting Steve Lawson today. The Nelson County grand jury indicting Lawson on 2 charges: conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence.
3 months after his son is indicted in the Crystal Rogers case, Steve Lawson is arrested and facing charges. Special prosecutor Shane Young officially tying him to the disappearance and death of the 35-year-old mother of 5. Steve Lawson's attorney says the arrest came as a shock after dozens of police interviews and a promise of immunity.
What do you think they have on him?
I don't know if they have any more than I've told you, but they apparently they chose to indict him rather than give him the immunity that he was promised.
I'm Shay McAlister, and this is Bardstown. 53-year-old Steve Lawson is from Nelson County, a former employee of Brooks Houck. You'll remember his voice from this phone call, when Houck called him from the interrogation room during a police interview at the sheriff's office back in 2015.
I just want to tell you I'm sorry about everything that's going on in your life, brother, and I got you in my prayers.
I said it is a very difficult and trying time, but I appreciate you.
Until his arrest, that was the only time we had heard Steve Lawson's name. He was taken into custody in southern Indiana, where he was visiting his mom. After he was arrested, police made a plan to have him extradited back to Nelson County, where he would face a judge. But planning an extradition doesn't always happen quickly. So while we waited for that court date, I tracked down his representation, a well-known attorney from the area named Theodore Lavitt. He agreed to talk to me about his client's involvement in the case. I met him outside a picturesque courthouse in Springfield, Kentucky, not far from Bardstown.
From your understanding, was Stephen Lawson involved in the death of Crystal Rogers?
No, he was not.
What do you think his connection is to this case?
He was an employee, part-time employee of Houck, and he had an association with Houck. Mr. Houck has had conversations with him about Crystal, and that's the extent of my client's involvement.
He told us Steve Lawson retained him as representation early in 2023 after getting a phone call from Kentucky State Police. And since then, there have been dozens of police interviews.
What has the investigation looked like as far as you can tell?
Looked like they were trying to find evidence, and they hadn't found it yet, and they weren't satisfied. The Commonwealth wasn't satisfied with respect to what they had. They were looking for more.
About how many times do you think police have been in touch with Stephen?
Over a dozen.
Just this year?
Many more than a dozen.
And what about that phone call? Police have released it as that it was from the interrogation room.
That's correct.
What do you make of that phone call?
It was a set-up phone call. One was supposed to call the other, and the ring came in, and they spoke.
He didn't elaborate on that 2015 phone call, the one that came in the middle of the night, on the night Crystal Rogers disappeared. But he was willing to discuss Steve's son, Joseph Lawson, who was also in custody, facing the same charges related to Crystal's death.
And what about Steve's son?
Steve's son, I'm not sure about the evidence that they have against Steve's son. I know that he's extremely involved.
Extremely involved. Those were the attorney's words. The next question was obvious. If Joseph Lawson was that involved, how? The attorney gave one very specific example. He claims it was Joseph who drove Crystal Rogers' car to the Bluegrass Parkway.
Vehicle was the maroon vehicle that was parked out on mile marker 14 on the Bluegrass Parkway heading west. It was driven out there by Joey Lawson. He had a flat tire at that mile marker, and my client received a phone call, went out there and got him, brought him back.
So Steve has told you that he went and picked up Joey from the Bluegrass Parkway where he had driven Crystal's car.
Was told the state police that, told the FBI that, told the Commonwealth's attorney that from Hardin County, who's in charge of the investigation.
Crystal's car has long been a key piece of evidence in her case, since the day it was discovered with a flat tire, keys, phone, and purse left behind. Police have questioned the discovery. In this 2015 police interview with Brooks Houck, Detective John Snow points to the unusual circumstances.
I guess the biggest problem that I have is that most women are not going to walk away from their purse and their cell phone in the car.
I agree with you.
You know what I'm saying? If she were going to walk to go find help or something, she would take her phone even if it was dead. She wouldn't. My wife wouldn't leave her purse anywhere for any reason. So I can't figure why she would walk away from the car and leave the purse there.
But it wasn't just what was left behind on the Bluegrass Parkway that drew suspicion. It was also what investigators couldn't find. Detective John Snow detailing an unsuccessful search with bloodhounds. Bloodhounds who were trained and prepped to track Crystal's scent.
When we took the bloodhounds up there, the lady commented that it was though she wasn't even there. I mean, they had her things that you provided us for scent, and they said it was as though she was not even there. I can't explain that. I don't understand what that means. I don't know why, if it's her car and she leaves in it sometime Friday night, why does it appear to the dogs that she's not even there?
I agree with you.
This same set of bloodhounds tracked her in the car from 49, and they had never been to your mom's farm before, tracked her scent all the way down 49, turned on Balltown Road, and turned on Pascal Ballard as though they were following your car. So I know the dog's not defective.
That's right.
Because they're following her scent, and they don't know where your mom lives. They've never been there before. So the dog's nose is not defective. So when the dog doesn't even try to find her on the parkway where her car ends up, it's just very odd to me. And I can't figure out why they wouldn't find any scent of her at all if she walked one way or another.
They would have picked it up.
Right. They would have at least walked far enough for her to have been picked up by somebody. You have, if you break down on the parkway, somebody's not going to pull bumper to bumper with you, so you're going to have to walk from your car to their car to get in.
Right.
So the dog doesn't even act like it wants to go in one direction or another, even far enough for her to have even gotten in a car with somebody.
Brooks Houck tells the police detective he doesn't know why Crystal's scent didn't pick up in the car or on the road. The investigator deems it mysterious and leaves it at that.
That's just weird to me. I don't understand. Unless she was never in her car when it got put on the parkway.
His speculation in that moment, now known to be true. Attorney Ted Lavitt sharing it wasn't Crystal who drove the car to the Bluegrass Parkway. She was never there. It was Joseph Lawson who drove the car until it got a flat tire, and then he called his dad to pick him up. It begs the question, why? And when did Joseph Lawson get involved in all this? I asked the attorney point blank.
Do you think that Brooks Houck paid Joseph Lawson to help in the murder of Crystal Rogers?
I think the Commonwealth has been trying to establish that a payment was made. As to who that payment was made to and when it was made, I'm not privy to that information yet.
The idea that Crystal's death was a hired job isn't a new concept, but this was the first time anyone confirmed it was a working theory with police. The attorney wouldn't confirm how or if Joseph Lawson was involved in that payment, only saying it seems from interrogations the prosecutor plans to present evidence on a payment. Still, the attorney maintained his client, Steve Lawson, wasn't involved in that theory or any theory when it comes to Crystal's death.
I did not hurt Crystal and was not involved in hurting Crystal. I didn't plan to hurt Crystal. I didn't conspire to hurt Crystal. Those are his statements. And that's what he has told the Kentucky State Police and the FBI and the Commonwealth's attorney time after time after time in this year.
The attorney says Steve Lawson has been interviewed dozens of times and answered questions willingly because investigators had promised him immunity.
Oh, so he had been in discussions with them.
He has, and I have.
Regarding some sort of deal?
Immunity.
To say what he knows.
What's known as transactional immunity.
Transactional immunity is defined as an agreement between a prosecutor and a witness. Once a witness testifies about an offense, he may never be prosecuted for that offense, no matter how much evidence may come to light later. Despite an attorney's claims that this was discussed, Steve Lawson was arrested, and he was charged, and investigators continued looking for new evidence.
A new dig happening in Nelson County as we speak, connected to one of Bardstown's unsolved cases. They are searching in Cox Creek, which is in Nelson County. The dig has been focused on this property off of Thompson Hill Road. It's near the Nelson and Bullitt County lines. You can see here that property butts up against a wooded area with a long gravel driveway leading up to a house.
This was the first search we were aware of in 2023. And unlike previous searches where the FBI would tell us where they were searching and why, this one was kept quiet until somebody tipped me off. When I got there, I found heavy machinery, multiple unmarked law enforcement vehicles, a dump truck, and a dozen people carrying shovels and rakes. They were focused on an area on the edge of the woods and had dug a massive hole big enough for 3 or 4 cars to fit inside. The FBI would not confirm anything, explaining this search was under the direction of Special Prosecutor Shane Young. When I finally got the Special Prosecutor on the phone, he told me it was connected to one of 3 Bardstown cases: Crystal Rogers, Tommy Ballard, or Jason Ellis. He would not specify which case, but on scene, Crystal Rogers' grandfather told me his gut pointed to Crystal.
It feels real good. Maybe finally we'll get some justice and find Crystal's remains. And I believe it has to be Crystal's remains because Jason Ellis, they buried him and we buried Tommy, so she's the only one in Nelson County that's left.
He didn't recognize the name of the property owner or know of any ties to the area, but said a recent conversation with the FBI was giving him hope.
I talked to FBI a couple weeks ago, and I asked him again. Betty asked him, "Do you think you'll find Crystal's remains?" And he told me, he said, "Yes, we will." I just hope the day comes that we can get her remains and bury her, and everybody involved in this will pay for it the rest of their lives.
Till Ballard has been waiting for the day the people responsible for his granddaughter's death were held accountable, and he's been steadfast in his belief of who those people are. And on a warm morning in September, news of another arrest started to spread through Bardstown, an arrest so many had waited for, wondering would it ever happen. The man named as the main suspect in his girlfriend's disappearance 8 years earlier was surprised on a construction site where he was working, met with undercover officers, put into handcuffs all before 8 a.m. A neighbor up the street spotted the arrest and took a picture, quickly spreading word.
Brooks Howe has been arrested.
Thrill. Thank goodness, finally some justice. Get him locked up.
I found out from an early morning phone call. A member of Crystal's family called me, asking if I'd heard the news. When I called the FBI to confirm they had made the arrest, they told me he was just loaded into the police car, only a few minutes earlier. As I made my way to the Nelson County Courthouse to get a look at the charges, my phone was ringing off the hook. It was hard to believe. Brooks Houck had been connected to the investigation since the very beginning, but for years walked free. I found my report from 8 years earlier, The day Nick Houck was fired from the police department and his brother Brooks was named the main suspect in Crystal's case, I was 22 during this live report.
The sheriff also says he doesn't have enough evidence to make an arrest, but he does have 8 pages of, quote, circumstances that make him believe Houck's brother, Brooks, is responsible for Roger's disappearance, and that Nick Houck knows what happened, making Brooks the main suspect and Nick a person of interest.
We could have never known then that it would take 8 years for there to be an arrest here. But once law enforcement made the move, they did so with purpose. Brooks Houck was booked into multiple jails on the morning he was arrested, meaning we had multiple mugshots. In the first, at the Nelson County Detention Center, he wore the gray t-shirt he had worn to work. For the second mugshot, also in Nelson County, he was changed into a bright orange jumpsuit. And it was in that jumpsuit that he was led out of the jail, hands and feet shackled, to be transferred to the Hardin County Detention Center, where he took yet another mugshot. The jail later released surveillance video showing the moment Brooks Houck was escorted out of the jail and into a car in handcuffs and ankle shackles.
Finally, his face is not smug. He knows he's been caught.
It's just a miracle that this has happened, and finally, he's where he needs to be and where he's supposed to be, and he needs to stay there.
When we got to the courthouse, we pulled all of the records available. It was just 4 pages. The grand jury had returned the indictment 3 days before the arrest, detailing 2 charges: murder and tampering with physical evidence. The murder charge stemmed from July 4th weekend, 2015, when the grand jury believes Brooks Houck acted alone or with another to commit the offense of murder by intentionally causing the death of Crystal Rogers. The second charge, tampering with physical evidence, indicated the jury believes Brooks Houck destroyed, mutilated, concealed, removed, or altered physical evidence that would have been used in an official proceeding. The 2 people who testified to the grand jury included a Kentucky State Police detective and a special agent with the FBI. After the prosecutor entered the indictment into court record, it was sealed until Houck's arrest, meaning it was hidden from public view. Well, that arrest came just 3 days later, and the documents were made public. The FBI released a statement reading, "FBI Louisville has been laser-focused on our commitment to hold accountable those who were responsible for the disappearance of Crystal Rogers. Today, we take a significant step in making good on that promise."
Everybody was just left in this gray area, and that gray area has color now that Brooks Houck is behind bars.
My first reaction was just Sherry and her family getting the justice that they have fought so much for and never let up. Her faith has just been inspiring to everyone. And to get those answers, it gave me chills, for her.
People across town were thinking of Crystal's mom, Sherry, and the rest of the Ballard family. This was news they had been waiting for almost a decade. But Sherry was focused on her family, immediately heading to the courthouse to file for custody of the son Crystal and Brooks shared. The little boy was just 2 years old when Crystal went missing and had been in the care of his father since then. Sherry and her husband Tommy filed for custody of the child right away, showing up to court dates in between searches, wearing t-shirts that read prayers for Crystal. They had to go face to face with the man named as the main suspect in their daughter's disappearance. We covered those court cases and even asked Brooks about Crystal as he left the courtroom one day in the months after she went missing.
No comment. Thank you. Y'all have a good day.
He never stopped to answer our questions, but Tommy and Sherry would stop and talk to us, never giving up hope.
We're going to get through it and we're going to see him.
6 months after those hearings concluded, Sherry and Tommy were granted Saturday visits with the child every other weekend. But he wasn't allowed to see his 4 other siblings who were living with Sherry and Tommy, their grandparents. In an interview from 2021, Sherry described just how difficult that was.
I had to come home and tell these kids that lived here, that was his sisters and brothers, that they could not see him that tore my heart out, to do that.
Eventually, the Ballards were granted longer visits, full weekends, and even some holidays. And then, one accusation from the Houck family put a stop to it all.
Brooks told the courts that something was said. Eli came home and told him someone said something about his father in my home on a visit.
According to court documents, Brooks Houck testified in court that after returning from visits with the Ballards, the little boy was sullen and uncooperative. The paperwork goes on to say the little boy was accusatory, asking his father, quote, "What did you do to my mommy?" Sherry says she doesn't know what happened. She doesn't believe anyone in her family would have said something like that. But she says she didn't get another hearing to share her side of that story.
I didn't even get to prove anything.
Since then, Sherry has tried to use new laws to challenge the ruling, but it's never gone in her favor. Now, on the day of Brooks' arrest, she was trying again. As a journalist, this was a tricky subject for me. I know it's a point of public interest, but at the same time, we're talking about an innocent child. A child who is now old enough to read and follow news updates. I decided then I wouldn't cover the custody battle any further. I didn't feel comfortable discussing the little boy's life and his future. So that's where I leave that part of the story. As for his dad, Brooks Houck, our coverage was only beginning. His attorney immediately started filing motions in the case, first tackling the defendant's $10 million bond.
New developments in the case of Brooks Houck. His attorney asking for a lower bond and possible home incarceration.
In the bond motion filed in Nelson County Circuit Court, the attorney asked a judge to lower it from $10 million to $500,000. It was a 14-page document listing all of the reasons why the attorney believed Houck should receive a lower bond. The attorney wrote the bond was excessive, unprecedented, and unconstitutional. He went on to say Houck has complied with law enforcement, has no criminal convictions, always maintained his innocence, and never tried to run away. Of course, this was only one side of the case, but we would have to wait until his arraignment to hear the other side. Next time on Bardstown.
Breaking news from the arraignment of Brooks Houck this afternoon in Nelson County. Houck appearing via live video for his first court appearance in the murder of Crystal Rogers. And then the surprise no one saw coming. Prosecutors dropping a major bombshell in this case. Key evidence in the murder of Crystal's father, Tommy Ballard.
In front of a packed courtroom, the prosecutor ties Brooks Houck and his family to another murder in Bardstown.
We are waiting for testing to come back on the firearm we believe was used to murder Tommy Ballard, a firearm that we purchased from Nicholas Houck, who was using a fake name when he sold the rifle. It's been stated before, the truth will set you free. The problem in this matter is the truth will imprison Brooks Houck.
Bardstown, the podcast, is a WHAS 11 news production. It's written by me, Shay McAlister, and edited by WHAS 11 chief photojournalist Philip Murrell. You can visit our website, WHAS11.com, to learn more about the cases we cover and see exclusive visual elements supporting everything we talked about today.
Let's get out.